Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the council. Welcome to this evening's South East Area Planning Committee, which is the last one of this council. The next one will be a completely different set of members. So, agenda item 1, Chairman's notices. Recording of the meeting. Please note the council will be recording and publishing on the council's website any part of this meeting held in open session. And fire, in the event of a fire, officers will notify those present, as if we didn't already know. Please use the fire exits marked with the green running man, which is the door you just came in by. The fire assembly point is Barclays Bank car park, which is across the road. Please gather there and await further instruction. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. The only one I have is Councillor Bill.
We've received apologies for absence from Councillors Passenger and Bill.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Agenda item 3, minutes of the last meeting to be found on pages 7 to 10 to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the committee held on the 15th of March of this year. Members agree all that?
Yep.
Everybody happy?
Yep.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 4, disclosure of interest, to disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other registrable interests and non-registrable interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraph 9 and appendix B of the Code of Conduct for members. And members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware should the need arise throughout the meeting. And while I'm speaking, I will just say for agenda item 5, I do know the applicant and the agent. I don't believe it's prejudicial in any form. Any other members? Councillor Fluker. Councillor Mrs. Channer.
Well, when I say I know the agent,
I think we all know the agent.
And also, as I did when the previous application came up, although under a different description, some years ago I did have a car maintained there. Okay. Not regularly, but I took it there for occasion. Thank you.
Councillor Hill. Right, nobody else. We'll move on to agenda item 5. Loftmans Farm, Maldon Road, Steeple, the construction of a 2-storey detached rural workers dwelling, change of land use to C3. There's a recommendation to refuse for the reasons as detailed in section 8 of this report, but it is before this committee as it's member call in from councillors Mrs. Channer and MW Helm. We need the rest of that. Right, who's presenting this one?
Right, Mr. Marsh.
Mr. Marsh, please.
Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me all right?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Good. If you can't hear me for whatever reason, just shout or notify me, otherwise I'll just carry on. So I'll just share my screen now, so hopefully we can get going. So can everybody see that all right?
Yes.
Good. So this is an application for the construction of a 2-storey detached rural workers dwelling and the change of use of the land from sui generis uses kennels to C3 residential. And the sign is outlined in the red hatching here on this plan. The next plan shows the application site in red as usual, and then the wider land holding, which is the area of land used for the alpaca operation, is identified within the blue line here. And you've got the paddocks that are referred to in the report that you can see. These are the existing kennel buildings which are proposed to be demolished. So you can see there's sort of a group of 4 separate buildings, with this larger group of buildings occupying the main part of the site. The dwellings are certainly of no architectural merit and predominantly single story, as you can see. And as explained in the report, there has been a building condition survey provided as part of the application, which concludes that they are not viable for to bring back into use as kennels. So this is the proposed site plan for the new dwelling. You can see that it's positioned here with the veranda to the front and parking for 3 dwellings at the front, and then access off this road here, which is like a crescent, which you'll see in a minute, that comes off from the main Maldon road. And you've got the existing kennel buildings outlined in green, which are all proposed to be demolished, with the main buildings outside the site boundary, of course, being retained. And you've got the Loftmans farm bungalow, which is within the blue line, just there to the west. So this is the proposed design, floor plans and elevations for the new dwelling. Conventional 2-storey form with a pitched roof, and the proposed finishing materials are composite cladding and a clay tile roof. And the arrangement is for a master bedroom on the ground floor, and then a large lounge dining area. And then on the first floor, there are 2 bedrooms with a bathroom and a large office TV room, which, as said in the report, has the potential to be used as a bedroom, sorry. So this is the aerial shot showing the location with an approximate position of this sort of red pin that's on the Google Earth image. So you can just see the white roofs of the buildings on the site here, which I've zoomed in on this slide. So you've got the Maldon Road running along on sort of northwestern corner, and then this is the site here where my mouse is, with the buildings that are proposed to be demolished, and that's the bungalow that I referred to earlier. And then we've got the Willow Cottage here, which is the existing dwelling that's accessed from that link road. And then you can see here quite clearly the outline of the paddocks, with, I think there are alpacas on there at the time. So this is just a couple of views from the Maldon Road. This is heading west back towards Maldon. You've got the access coming off here to the site behind those trees. And then that's from the opposite direction looking east, and that's the other access at the other end of that short loop road. And then this is the dwelling that I referred to, Willow Cottage, which is accessed off that road as you approach into the site. This is a drone shot that's been provided, closing up on the site, so you can see quite clearly then the extent of the site that's covered with the kennel buildings that are going to be removed, and then the arrangement I've been referring to earlier on. So just a few photographs of the site and its setting. Again, that's the cottage, Willow Cottage I referred to earlier as you come in, and then enter the site in front of where the photograph was taken. And then this slightly further in on that road, looking back out, you've got a Willow Cottage again, and then the carport and Loftmans bungalow there. Just a few photographs within the site. I won't go into much detail on this, but it gives you a good idea of the current state of the site, and the position in which the photographs are taken can be ascertained from this plan here. So on the northern edge, you've got this single-storey building, which is within the site, which would be demolished, and then looking across to that building there, which is outside the site, which is in commercial use. And then that's looking back the other way, so you can see the bungalow, and then the road that I've been referring to goes out in that direction. And then that's just a shot from within the site. Some more photographs within the site itself, got this sort of central area here, which is on that these 2 photographs. And then moving slightly further south, you've got these timber buildings that are at the southern edge of the site, these buildings here. And again, that's going further south, keep back on those buildings so you can look back into the site. And then that gauge is a useful reference point. Looking out onto the paddock that I referred to earlier, and then that's just looking in slightly further in the other direction. A couple of further photographs of the site is closer to the site entrance, so that's photograph 10 is looking sort of down that side of those buildings that are going to be demolished, and then photograph 14 is up on the side access road looking back down in. Got just 4 photographs here to give you an idea of the current state of the buildings from the inside. And then these are some photographs of the paddocks around the application site, which you'll recall are within the applicant's control. Again, some alpacas there. So the top 2 are looking to the east, and the bottom 2 are looking to the south. Just brought this slide up as a reminder to you as I just talk you through the key issues to be considered. Fundamentally, the starting point really is the previous application, which was for an identical design and location for the dwelling. The only difference being that this time the applicant has provided supporting information to justify the proposal as a rural workers dwelling. Unfortunately, for the reasons set out in the report, the reason has not been overcome, and I'll just briefly outline and summarise those issues to you as set out in the report. You can break
issues of location, the loss of employment and character. In terms of location, it is outside any settled boundary, and I know new dwellings are only supported if they are an essential worker. And then, in terms of need, the applicant has provided financial information and a letter from West Point Farm Vets and a letter from the Director of the British Alpaca Society, which do help his case, but are not sufficient to demonstrate the need to have a full-time worker on the site. Importantly, there is an existing dwelling at the farm and no information has been supplied on why this would not be a suitable alternative dwelling. The current business does appear to be viable, but there's no business plan to illustrate possible future growth. The size and nature of the dwelling is not commensurate with the needs of the enterprise concerned, and this last point is an important one. The applicant intends to expand the herd, and his ability to reside on site would enable the stock to expand 300% over the next 3 or 4 years. But crucially, Policy 87 requires that where on-site accommodation is essential, permission will only be granted in the first instance for a temporary structure, which can easily be removed within 3 years of the date of planning consent. So if members were to accept that a need for the dwelling has been demonstrated, then the position should be one of refusal of this application and invitation to submit an application for a temporary structure in accordance with that policy. In terms of the loss of employment use, as I mentioned earlier, a building survey report has been provided by the applicant, but this is not sufficient to justify the loss of the employment site itself and meet the necessary requirements of Local Plan Policy E1. And in terms of character, there's no difference to the character of this dwelling. It's exactly the same, so they haven't addressed that element of the reason for refusal. And then the other 2 reasons for refusal, the first one has been overcome through the provision of an ecological report, and the third reason can be overcome through the provision of a unilateral undertaking. I am aware that the agent has submitted and circulated an email to members seeking to rebut the key points made in the report. I would just like to come back on those in summary. Irrespective of the position with the 5-year housing land supply and the relative proximity to Maldon and Steeple, there are no public footpaths or pavements leading from the site into the settlements, and the only route is a busy 60-mile-an-hour road with thin grass verges and no streetlights. In terms of the loss of employment use, I've sort of summarised that, but I'd refer members, before they make their decision, to paragraph 5.1.15 of my report, which goes through that. So, in terms of the unilateral undertaking, the agent, I think, has submitted a unilateral undertaking, which would, of course, overcome that reason, so you would just be left with one main reason for refusal as set out. It is recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. We have, as far as I'm aware, only one speaker tonight, and that's Mr. Tony Cousin, who's agent for the applicant. Mr. Cousin, if you'd like to step forward and find a microphone, you know the rules. You have 2 minutes to make your case from the time the clock appears, if we've got one.
Yeah, sorry, just before we do that, Tim would have to, I think, I'm not quite sure of the setup here, but remove his presentation so we can get the clock. Sean, are we able to get the clock?
Is that okay? I'll stop sharing now.
Yeah, you may need to close down your visuals.
Or I didn't catch that.
No, I said you may need to just close down your visuals. Just, I'm not sure where the clock is.
Go after the clock. Well, sorry, I'm not sure what I'm being asked to do.
You don't do the clock, the clerk does the clock. The clerk does the clock, Tim.
Yeah, the
Fred, are you able to bring up the clock, please?
Yeah, bear with me 1 second.
Sorry, I wasn't aware of that.
Remote clerking. What a nonsense.
oh, there we are.
Right, Mr. Cousin, 2
Right.
minutes.
Let me
From the time you
just
start speaking.
find where the cursor is, just so I can.
You there?
Okay.
Right, thank you, Chairman. This kind of repeats what you've heard already in the officer report, but hopefully members have had a chance to read the email sent round. Difficult to get the case across in 2 minutes. But you will recall, hopefully, that this has been before you before, and there was a lot of, or there appeared to be a lot of support for the previous scheme, but members were concerned about an agricultural tying this property to the holding. So this will enable you to do that, should you be minded body to grant planning approval. And all of that was done on the back of the advice of the planning officer at the time. The applicant has provided the required supporting information by way of the farm enterprise business accounts, sustainable business plan going forward, expert witness statements from the vet, the alpaca, as you've heard, Alpaca Breeders Society, an ecology survey, a contamination survey, and a structural surveyors survey of the buildings. A signed RAMS agreement was submitted with the application, so I'm surprised that that's given us a refusal in the second case or the second point. The proposal will not really cause the loss of employment site members. This only ever employed one person, which was the applicant's mother. That use ceased 13 years ago, and if the farm holding was to be able to expand, it's likely to provide more employment opportunities than the dog kennels ever would or likely to in the future. Regarding the character, the applicant still remains at a loss as to how the character can be accurately assessed. To our knowledge, no planning officer has ever visited the site yet. Hopefully we'll take this into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, good timing. Ward members. Councillor Mrs. Channer?
Shall I start?
Yeah, I'll let you start, yeah.
Councillor Hill.
I mean, I've got some questions.
Members, Mr. Chairman, members, I don't know if you realise that farming is the biggest industry in the world. Farming is now entering into diversification to be profitable. This is an application for a farm, Loftmans farm, and if they want to expand, especially with animals, they need to be on site. They need to be there to care for the animals. Anything can happen in the middle of the night. I come from a farming background, so I know all about this sort of thing. And I propose, against the officer's recommendation, to approve this, citing sustainable growth, settlement boundaries and countryside, D1, design, quality build, environmental, H7, agricultural essential workers accommodation, and E4, agricultural rural diversification. Because without this dwelling, he can't expand. He needs to be on the site to look after these animals. They're obviously unique to this area, and that's one thing we should improve this. So I look forward to someone seconding my proposal.
Is that duly seconded? Yes, Councillor Mr. Channer. Thank you. Right, Councillor Mrs. Channer.
Well, Chairman, I'm going to make some points here. I think it's a pity, and this isn't meant as criticism. There was actually a rather significant document put forward to this authority with this application, which was both a design and access but a planning statement. And I suppose on reading that and studying that, why I can see why the officer may have come up with the policy refusals they have done. And I think there's some pertinent points here. The dog kennels actually cover quite a significant area, and there's some very good photographs supplied with that statement I'm just referring to. And I would like to know if an officer has visited the site, by the way, because I'm aware from the first time around there wasn't, so I would like to know if an officer did go and visit the site. And I think what's important to me, I know we've heard about the studio's use and the dog kennels, and we're talking about loss of employment site. Well, the buildings, there's been a survey report, totally in total state of decay. I mean, it would require significant financial investment. In fact, I don't think they could be brought back into use. The point is, to me, that's then to a degree brownfield land. We're not talking about virgin farmland here, and we're certainly not talking about, glasses keep slipping down, wanting to build on a vast area of this farm. The farm holding itself is significant. Loftmans is about 13.6 acres. And we're talking about 773.7 metres squared to be demolished. If this proposal were to be agreed by this committee, it would have significant amenity space. There's also car parking spaces not referred to in the report. And actually, the amount that this proposal would occupy of the area of existing buildings to be demolished, so if it was to be allowed, would only be 22.5%. So I see that to be a planning gain in terms of very ugly buildings that are in a state of decay, which we've seen that photo, and I've actually got photos here on that planning statement showing all the buildings in their form. So there'd be a gain there in my estimation, significant, if you're going to only occupy 22.5%. And also, of course, if you put that then into the equation of what the application site would be covering, and the report does detail that, the proposed dwelling would only occupy 7.24% of the application site. And the application site only 3.92% of the land making up Loftmans farm. And yet we're hearing this would have significant impact on the countryside. Now we're not talking about, thank goodness, 4 dwellings coming or 9 dwellings coming. And we are talking about a dwelling that is required because the alpaca farm, and I was part of that in terms of the officer saying we're not sure of the success of it. But clearly the applicant wants to, he's doing diversification and the Farmers Council have said, but increase that. And I've read the reports from both the vet and the other person backing this up, and it would make sense, I forget what the business of this is called, Camel something, but how it explains how actually this is sort of important to have someone on site. When I look at the photographs that are being supplied with that statement, and I'm doing a visualisation of that dwelling, I can see, to me, significant visual impacts. The Stark Kennels, if we're talking about them being out of use for about 12 years, if they were to come back, always saying that's the use, you should have the employment. What about the significant car journeys then? What about noise and everything? Here we would have someone on site that would reduce actually that person coming to do other various aspects in terms of requirements of the family, but also for the other business use nearby. So I could see the benefits of cutting down motor vehicle journeys, not adding to the equation. And I'll close it there, Tim, there's another point, but I don't quite pick them up on my dreadful doctor's handwriting. But I just do make those points. I can see why the officers honed in, if you like, on the evidence and everything. But to me, I feel there is a certain amount of evidence protected, but I'm looking at the bigger picture in terms of what I see as planning going, and I'm going to hear from, no doubt, Mr Johnson to tell me where I'm wrong. But if I see dreadful buildings being demolished, which I see on brown land, see a dwelling coming, and it takes up far less use of that site, and the whole outside site, the whole establishment of the farm, to me, I see that as a planning game, Chairman.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Skiggs.
Yes, my feeling, what's ringing in my ears is one of the officers' statements that if we do approve this, then we really should approve temporary accommodation. And indeed, one of the concerns I have about such a development like this is how do we know in the future that this will not just become a private house in a private area? So, whereas if you go with the suggestion that we approve that the applicant reapplies with a temporary dwelling, then that's a demonstration of their commitment to the business of farming. And now I don't know the applicant, of course, and I don't mean to cast any aspersions, but we have to take a general view of what is possible. And so there is a danger that if we allow such developments, we're setting precedents that may be a problem.
Okay. Any other members? Councillor
I wondered
Councillor
if
Fluker.
the officer, I mean, there's a huge amount of questions, particularly some very pertinent ones from Councillor Chan. Perhaps the officer, I'm sorry, I don't know how to call his name.
Mr. Marsh.
Mr. Marsh might like to, not in the committee, would like to perhaps answer some of those questions. and the most searching one, I believe, is, did the case officer visit the site?
Mr Marsh, can you help?
Michael has visited the site. I'm working some distance away, so it hasn't been possible for me to, but Michael, you visited the site, haven't you?
I haven't visited the site, but officers.
No, I went last night.
No, but I don't normally visit the site myself. Yeah, but officers Miss Sadler and Miss Herner had visited the site. Now, visiting the site doesn't necessarily mean that they've visited the owners of the site.
Chairman, with respect, I think last time we were told that every officer that visited the site was the one that put the yellow sign up, and I think they're from the No, they called something else.
Community
Community engagement.
Yeah, that
was,
yeah.
So,
I mean, that was a previous application.
I really am confused about
Yeah,
this.
that was a previous application.
Well, what puzzles me about this is, what puzzles me about this is, if an officer hasn't visited the site, and I mean visited it, they have no idea what the existing buildings on that site are like, but they cannot find that out from standing outside and peering in the driveway. So,
I think to put emphasis on the site visit is a bit sort of misguided, because there's plenty of information available on the state of the buildings. I've clearly presented in my presentation, so you can see that the condition of the buildings, and indeed acknowledge that they are in a poor state by the building surveyor. And just to say that during COVID, the local planning authorities up and down the country, officers didn't do site visits for months. So it's not an essential requirement. And in this case, there's sufficient information available. There's nothing that is hidden by not doing a site visit that you wouldn't be able to ascertain in order to make a decision.
Councillor
I'm really grateful for that. But I think that during the officer's presentation, they started talking about loss of character. And I think if you're going to talk about loss of character in a particular location, then you need to go there. You need to go there and you need to see it. And I actually visited this site, and what I saw with the greatest respect to the applicant was I'm trying not to use the word ghastly, but ramshackle buildings and everything else. And I thought, well, that hardly adds to the character of the area. And then my attention went to the local parish council. The local parish council were concerned about the size of the dwelling and the impact it was going to have. But from the drawings that I've seen this evening, I think that's quite minimal. But Chairman, one of my questions is that the officer has referred to the 5-year housing land supply. Can I ask you a question through you, Chairman? Does the council have a 5-year housing land supply?
Mr. Marsh?
I want to answer that.
If you can answer it, Tim. If not, I'll answer it.
Yeah. Well, my understanding is that the council officers are constantly monitoring the supply, and they're very close to having a 5-year supply. In this instance, it's not a determining factor, because given the location and the nature of the application as a dwelling for an essential rural worker in an unsustainable location. The important, and I'm going to just emphasise this, in having heard the various points that members have made, is that you need to make your decision in accordance with the development plan, and the policies that apply are quite clearly H7 and E1. And I've set that out in the report that the applicant has not demonstrated and provided sufficient information to enable you to make a decision and conclude that there is an essential need. The way forward, as I said in my presentation, if members consider there to be a need, is not to grant consent for this large dwelling that's not commensurate to the size of the operation, but to refuse the application and invite an application for a temporary building in accordance with the requirements of the policy.
Chairman, I'm really confused. I understand what the officer's saying about the 5-year housing land supply and the fact that overall it doesn't give much weight, but nevertheless it forms part of this. Report, and it mentions that the council doesn't have a 5-year housing land supply. And I'm mindful of the fact that really everything needs to be proof checked in this report. Would the officer be surprised that on the 30th of March, the Director of Strategy, Performance and Governance, Mr. Paul Dodson, made an announcement to full council saying that the council did have a 5-year housing land supply? I mean, did he not share that information with development management? He shared it with the council and the whole district, and it seemed to be a moment of rejoicement that we had 5.1 housing land supply. But I mean, you look as though you're at a disadvantage in spite of the fact that you didn't know. Thank you.
Right, Mr. Johnson,
Yeah.
that's a word.
Well, there was that announcement. That announcement was made to officers. But I think members are quite clear that that announcement is a point in time. It is not the official figure. It is not the figure. It is not the figure which has been robustly checked and which would form part of the annual monitoring report as normally would be the case.
Joe, can you let me come back? So we've got a director of Maldon District Council at a full council meeting presenting a figure of 5.1 years, and yet Mr Johnson saying it's got to be checked. I cannot believe that he would have announced 5.1 unless it had been checked. Chairman, I fear we're going off on a tangent. This will certainly be something I'll take up with Mr Johnson after the meeting, because something is clearly not right. Development management, it would have been so much easier, Mr Johnson, if there had been a members' update published after the 30th of March, because I know a lot of developers, national house builders are very much interested in that announcement on the 30th of March. I'll leave it there.
I do need to come back on this, because that was, members are fully aware of the circumstances in which that announcement was made, yeah? That announcement was fully caveated in terms that does not form the official 5-year housing land supply figure, which still is at 3.66. And that is clearly the case. And members are fully aware of the caveated position.
Well, I've listened to the tape several times, and certainly 3.66 was mentioned, and I would think it would be very foolhardy of the local authority to announce that figure unless they were absolutely sure, and I honestly think that they should have waited.
I do need to come back on this, because that is the published figure. That is the figure that is still on the website. These figures are published yearly. Yeah, the yearly figure is still 3.66. That has not been superseded by the updated report, and I'm sure the honourable member is quite clearly aware of that.
Well, I don't know why we've announced 5.1, but as I said,
yeah.
I think what we've
to the public is 5.1. Is it something to do with Rectory Road?
I mean, the relevance of this obviously has to be that as of this meeting's time, we're looking at 3.66 years housing land supply. So the answer is no, we don't have a 5-year housing land supply, and that's the only way we can look at it from what Mr Johnson tells us.
Well, why did the director make the announcement?
Well, I've no idea. I wasn't present.
I'm not here to actually discuss that. That is diverting us from what is the subject of the particular matter. The report has been written in the way in which we normally write reports when there is a dwelling proposed. There is a dwelling proposed here, and it's proposed on what is the established and the official published figure. And that is clearly the position.
There is not a 5-year housing land supply.
As Mr Marsh has put out, we are diverting from the topic, and what we do need to focus on is the policies. And it does seem to me, and I'll have to use what seems to be pretty colloquial here, is that maybe it can be argued as material considerations, but clearly the reasons that are given for justification of this application are not based on the policy. Thank you, Chairman.
Right, other members. Councillor Mrs Stamp. Councillor Miss Bell.
I'm sorry, I just only had a brief comment to make, following on from what Councillor Elm said. We know all too painfully what can happen when we have animals living on farm overnight. So, the fact that somebody is needed to be there is so important. So important. That was all right.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. Last time this came to committee, I don't remember the advice given to us as members that we should refer it back, because we did refer it back, to have a temporary structure.
No, the reason was that the previous application was for what's known as a marketable dwelling, not as for an agricultural workers dwelling.
I remember that, but there was a really long discussion that we talked about how suggestions that was made to actually help the applicant, and we as a committee suggested the applicant go back and discuss it with the planning officer. Now, I can't remember which planning officer it was, so forgive me, we've had a bit of a change around, Chairman. But I think to now turn around and have a report, and it's most probably correct, Mr Marsh is most probably far more experienced than the rest of us put together in planning, but then to turn around and change it yet again, to say you've now got to change it to have a temporary structure, whereas before that wasn't any advice that was given. So all I'm saying is I think it seems to be a little unfair and a bit mean in my books, Chairman. I mean, I'm more than happy to support it to go for the animal safety and also for the temporary structure. I don't, forgive me, Mr Marsh, I know we've never met in person, but I don't think I agree with the officer on this occasion. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Mrs Channer.
Well, Chairman, if I just make a few points. I mean, Mr Marsh, I'm one of those that do support policy largely, but I also feel there's some areas where you can bring some considerations into the matter, and hence my points about demolishing some very significant decayed buildings on a large area, and this dwelling for an agricultural person would cover a far less area. So I have some difficulty saying about the visual impact, if I'm frank, because to me that would look far better. And I've highlighted what the planning statement mentioned. I can see no reference within the report to that planning statement, which I felt was very, very detailed and gave me some consideration. Design and access statement by the agent and the planning statement, which gave a great deal of detail. I've got it here on my computer if anyone would like to have a look. Or you can find it if you go and look at the application.
I have it in front of me.
What I would say is leading me also, we always heard from an officer, a very respected officer, I have to say, who's no longer with the authority, always said also you have to consider things in the past, planning history, and we've had other appeal statements quoted to us. This authority, or this committee actually allowed, and in fact it was in the planning statement, land at Riversley. This committee, there was an officer refusal, and this committee gave permission to a dwelling on that site, and indeed there was also a business building on that site previous to that. Also not far from this site in Maldon, it was an inspector, okay, it's not exactly like for like. There was a farm, had a barn, went over onto residential conversion, so we've seen a bit of a reverse line here. We refused it as an authority with the arguments of not sustainable, transport, goodness knows what else. The inspector came along and approved, allowed that appeal. So we lost that one. Also, I would have to say, recently at Woodham Mortimer, which an officer did highlight to members not to go against the policy. Again, not like for like, but Woodham Mortimer, the little nice golf kitchen cut, or whatever you want to call it, 18 dwellings permitted. Loss of employment site, that the evidence or whatever the officer said, the committee disagreed and said that 18 houses should be allowed when previously there'd been 2 previous applications for residential refused. So I'm actually looking at some of the things that have gone on, which we've also said can be utilised, and that is why I have a degree of sympathies with this application. And I feel the points I made are valid, not to be detrimental to the officer's recommendation. I think I acknowledge that. I can see where the officer was coming from. But to me, I see a plan game. We're not talking about 3 houses coming. There are some dwellings around there.
I think there were four dwellings nearby.
We're talking about significant demolition of some very, very decayed, useless buildings. I'm sorry if I sound awful to the applicant and the agent. Useless buildings. But actually the statement does refer to decayed, and I think actually the surveyor made that. And so to me, I see a planning gain, betterment, in terms of allowing that dwelling in, and I've highlighted the percentages, which the planning statement from the agent highlighted, in percentage terms, what you demolish and what you get back. What you're getting back takes up far less than those demolished buildings do. And if you look at the whole holding of the farm itself, the percentages are very, very low, Chairman. So that's what I've honed in on, and I am actually disappointed that no reference or any detail from that planning statement was perhaps confined within the report before members tonight.
Right. Anybody else got anything to add? If not, there is a proposal by Councillor Helm, duly seconded by Councillor Mrs Channer, to approve the recommendation against officer recommendation.
No proposal recorded vote.
You can, if you so wish.
Only if it's seconded.
I'll second it.
Right, those in favour of approval, please show. 2, 3, 4. Councillor Helm, Councillor Mrs Channer, Councillor Mrs Stamp. It's all right, I'm there. The Councillor Miss Bell. Miss Bell, yeah.
It was to have Councillor Helm, sorry, Councillor Helm wants to say something. You had your arm up still.
No, I'm just voting to make sure I got it there.
Any against? Councillor Schemes? And there's 2 of us that are abstentions.
Well, I'll abstain on the basis that I don't think it's 100% policy compliant, but I do wish the applicant well.
I think there's more to be said in favour of approval than there is of refusal, especially considering a an inspected decision not a million miles away from you, in which he recommended the demolition of a farm building and a replacement with a dwelling house.
Well,
And
farm is another one, Chairman.
so, and there's
I forgot
several
to
about.
mention the national recently allowed, but it wasn't like, but again, if I can recall it, had to come back to this committee, it was deferred. In fact, Chairman, you could be in the chair, you had to leave the chair, and Councillor Fluke was in the chair, and it was virtually in the garden, and it was allowed, Chairman, it came back and the committee allowed it. So I'm just weighing up a number of other amendments. It's no disrespect to the planning officer, but actually I think it was a very good report that the officer presented, which I've got to be careful what I say, which was nice to see.
Right, conditions we probably should have dealt with first, but I assume just standard conditions with agricultural condition.
Oh, yes.
And the agent said that the RAMS agreement had been satisfied, but according to this report it has not been. And again, if it has been, then I would expect to see an update, amended update. So I think we need to include that.
I mean, to my knowledge, Chairman, if I give some information, I think there was a draft agreement actually submitted with the first application, which the authority are then to understand. If you read the document on the ground file, open to the public, says was disregarded. Now, I didn't raise that, but now Councillor Fluke has. So that is something, but to my knowledge, the applicant doesn't have any, or the agent on behalf of the applicant has said there's no problems with that. And I think the planning statement actually made clear that in that planning section I referred to.
Well, what I would say with that is that the section 106 would normally go through the process of checking, and subject to it being satisfactory, that's when the decision notice would be issued. So it's subject to that satisfactory checking process.
You need to say that's approved, Chairman. Been a long time getting there.
It's approved. Right, moving on. Agenda item 6. Any other items of business the chairman of the committee decides are urgent? I only have one, and it's a fairly minor one. Well, it isn't. It's a very important one. Good luck to all those of you who are standing in again in May, and for those of us who are not, well, I hope we can find something to do with our time.
You can always watch us, Chairman. Get elected.
We can always turn up and have a look, can't we?
Sitting just behind here, Chairman.
We might do that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank you for your long service to the council and Councillor Chandler. You've done an excellent job.
Councillor Helm.
How many years together? 32, Richard? Penny, Penny, I know you were
We're
17.
on way to a century if you had us all, because Michael's been around a couple of times around the block. So if you add it all up, but Chairman, can I just say, I think you've been an excellent chairman.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Always, I don't know, your manner, very nice, Chairman.
Thank you.
You're quite scary sometimes.
You close the meeting, Chairman. You're blushing. Close the meeting.
Right, well, thank you, officers, for all your time and effort over the last 4 years. And I will close this final meeting of this 4 years.
Mr. Marsh.